Sahana vavatu Sahano bhunaktu Sahaviryam karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gently open your eyes. Good to be back and good to see all of you. I feel like if there's a break in our satsang, it's hard to come back. But I am glad that you all got to hear Vivekji speak. I know he also had like 4 days of, I'm saying Chalisathon, but it's a Hanuman Chalisa classes. And you all had a discussion last week. Is that what happened mostly? Or
yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
Discussion last week. Anything that came up during discussion to share, or it's okay?
I think there are a lot of things
Oh.
talked about, which is good. I think there's a lot of talk on surrender. Surrendering.
Surrender, okay, okay.
How powerful and impactful is it?
Yeah, and is it really possible too, all right? Okay, thank you. And if there's any other questions from any other weeks, please text me, share it, or even leave an anonymous note here if you want, and we can discuss it. I've been having excellent conversations with a lot of people about sadhana, so thank you for inviting me into those conversations. I know they can be personal, and it takes vulnerability to really reflect on your spiritual place. Because we tend to, I'm taking classes in chaplaincy, I know I've said it before, but in those classes we talk about when we kind of lose meaning in life, right? And the whole meaning-making process. And one way that we talked about it last week was the gap between what ought to be and what is, right? Which, again, we had a discussion post and I put Gurudev's quote in there. I was like, Swami Chinmayaji says, because that's what comes to mind, the expectation and the reality, right? Whether it's for ourselves or the world, really nothing is 100% in our control. So in one of the conversations I was having, we actually talked about this bhakti, right, and this surrender. And the person was kind enough to share their life story with me. And we're at a point now where we're talking about how to build a relationship with Bhagavan, right? And I'm going to just share that. If it's useful, keep it. If not, it will become useful at some point, I think, in life. Because there will be points where we are, reaching and there's nothing there to pull from. And we'll be reaching from the outside first, and then we start reaching from the inside. And even when we reach from the inside, it could feel like there isn't anything there. So where do we start from? I'm going to start with the basis of, I believe there is some God, and I'm also starting from a basis of being able to see God incarnated, right? So a human form of Bhagavan. Now, if that is not something you believe, please tell me and we can address it in the next class, right? But I'm just picking a kind of middle ground. It's not, I don't believe in anything, and it's not, of course God is there, right? So the middle ground of there could be something, and it could be something that serves me as a guru form, or as Bhagavan or Bhagavati, Devi, Bhagavan Krishna, Ramji, Hanumanji, whatever you wish to see Bhagavan as. So if that's where I am, right? What we do is we have to think about our samskaras. Samskaras, remember, are things we come into this life with. The crazy and beautiful thing is that we are exactly where we're supposed to be. We are born into the families that we are born into for a reason. Our mother is our mother, our father is our father, whether we like it or don't like it. And our siblings are our siblings, our spouses are our spouses, multiple or one, and our children are our children. Everything happens because of our vasana accumulation and our samskaras. So, sometimes we're born into families that are deeply religious and we want to turn, I don't know how many of you have had these in your home, but there are these little machines that constantly chant, and it's not a human voice. It's very robotical, because that's how the technology was, I guess. But it would be like, Om Namo Narayana, or whatever, just a Om. And it's a little bit like a techno-y voice. But the reason I bring it up is, we might have found that annoying. In fact, we might have tuned it out. I remember I would hear that every day. I went to college, came back, and I was like, what is that sound? Did you start something new at home? Is this a new sadhana? And my mom's like, that's been on for years, and you only noticed it now. Well, our brains tend to do that, right? We hear something long enough, it goes away. We smell something long enough, it goes away. Sometimes that's a good thing. But our senses kind of get desensitized after a point. So my purpose with bringing that up is, when I'm thinking about my Ishta Devata, or the Bhagwan that I want to get to know, or I find some kind of affinity with, we can look to our families for that. Maybe I don't feel like, Bhagwan Krishna is the one for me, or Devi is the one for me, but you grew up hearing Om Namo Narayanaya, or you grew up with, every time somebody sneezed, they said Ishwara, right? Or Mahashivratri was a huge thing for you all, and you would fast, right? I know some people who would fast for Janmashtami, which was different because we feast for Janmashtami. So whatever celebration that was a big deal for you growing up, that could potentially be a Bhagwan that you are drawn to, right? So think about all of those things. Think about your family history. There are things called Kula Devatas, meaning for your Kula, or your clan, your tribe, your family, there's a Bhagwan they worship. And usually there's a temple, and you're supposed to go there at least once a year. And if you do Mundan and all, you take your kids there for Mundan, and it's something that you kind of stick with. Us being, thousands of miles away and maybe generations away, we kind of lose touch with that. But you could potentially ask your parents or your grandparents, if they're around, for them to share knowledge with you. So we can dig deep, that's what I'm saying, right? We can look back to our history, our family history, our clan's history, the fascinating journey. I know a lot of people like to go on that adventure later on in life when these questions become, nagging and you really want to figure out where you're from, or you're giving to your children some kind of a family history and you want to kind of take them back and be like, hey, I didn't grow up here, but this is where your grandparents grew up, right? Some people share some amazing trips to Bharat where they're like, I didn't even know, that this temple existed, but my great-grandfather helped build it, or whatever, So, where do we start? Start at the beginning, as far back as you can go. Start with your ancestors, right? So then, from there will be some link for you to hold on to. And you say, okay, this is the Ishta Devata I'm settling on, right? And it could change. I've met people whose Ishtas have changed. But try to keep it consistent, because that will be the focus of our meditation when we meditate. And the reason that's important is because that's where we will put our head down when we need a lap to put our head down at, right? So the consistency is key. Just as this is my mother and this is my father needs to be consistent for security, this is my Bhagwan needs to be there for my security, my spiritual security. And we build that relationship and security. And one example that a Swami gave is think about when you fall in love with someone, right? Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a child, whatever, you know. You don't just say, oh, I'm in love, now you love me, done. It's not that easy, right? There's no magic dust. And there's no, oh, I carried you for 9 months, no matter how much you try to guilt trip, it doesn't matter. Because the reality is it's a mutual and it needs awareness on both sides to build that relationship. Now, how much more do we work for our relationship with the divine, right? We can't just say, Bhagavan, my problem's done. You know, if you can, then I am at your feet. Because that shows that you have so many janmas of samskaras that you're able to put your head at Bhagavan's feet immediately. I'm getting goosebumps thinking of people like that. But there are people like that. But for most of us, we have to build that relationship, right? So I'll give you an example that's close to me because that's what I can speak truthfully about. Now you replace Krishna with whatever Bhagavan you wish to, right? So for me, it's Bhagavan Krishna. What does that mean to get close to Krishna? What is the process that it took? First, identifying. Because I'd be like, Swamiji, I don't know. What's an Ishta? Like, we have pictures of 50 gods at my house. Like, I don't know. We pray to everybody. And, some, pictures I think are beautiful. Navratri is fun. And, Krishna is beautiful and cute as a baby. But also, I love him with Radha. There's such a completeness in that relationship. And what is it? And that's when Swamiji asked me to dig deeper. And for me, every time my parents would get up and sit down, it was Narayana. And for our Kula Devata, it's Ananta Padmanabha Swami, right? And so many names in our family have Anantas, have Krishna and all of that. We have Hanumanji as well, we have Ramji, we have Devi, but the line was more Vishnu, right? So he said, okay, you stick with Narayana, right? And for me, the form of Narayana was not the Chakradhari Narayana, it was Krishna. Okay. So, then settling there, how do I build a relationship? How do we build any relationship, right? You text back and forth, right? Don't ghost, be respectful. You date, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, it takes time, energy, focus. Think about that time, whether it's a significant other or your children or whatever, or even people that you see as your host moms and dads, right? In whatever countries you visited, whoever becomes close to you, your mentors, how much do you think about them? How often are they on your mind? How are you like, oh, their birthday's in March, their birthday's in March, their birthday's in March, and March comes and you're like, oh, the people that your mind wants to hold on to. Right? That's the energy you put towards Bhagavan. You read Bhagavan stories, right? And the Puranas, there's 18 Puranas. You want Devi Purana, it's there. You want Bhagavatam, Bhagavan Krishna, it's there. You want Ramji, Ramayana is there. And there are dozens of versions of Ramayana. There are people who do PhDs on 1 or 2 versions. You could spend janmas studying the Ramayana. What we're familiar with is what? Which Ramayanas? Tulsidas Ji's Ramayana? Valmiki Ji's? Yes. Potana, I think Pota Ramayana, that's a Telugu one. Any Telugu people? No? Yeah. Well, there's a Telugu Ramayana. Then there's a Kamba Ramayana. That's Tamil. Any Tamil people in the house? See, you can teach me different Ramayanas are there. What language is that? In Hindi. Nice. So different bhaktas have written different versions of Ramayana. So when we're that much in love with Bhagavan, we can even write his story. There's in fact many gurus, gurujis that tell you, hey, you ask them a question, oh, what exactly happened when Bhagwan Krishna was tied to that stamba and, his mom was upset with him? And they'll think and they'll say, the last time I saw Bhagwan Krishna in that story, he told me, and they'll tell you as though it was a conversation between them and Bhagwan, right? They can write their own versions of the Leelas of Bhagwan. So what do? We read at least, right? So you pick and you read. When you read, you learn more. It is a fact, a scientific fact, that memory works better when it's in a story form, right? I don't know how many of you have looked into brain mapping and things like that, but I have poor memory when it comes to certain things, and then other things I'm like, well, on that day and this thing, and I remember very well. So I was curious. I'm like, why? Why is it I can't remember some formula for my Algebra 2 class, but I can remember all of this gossip that my friend just told me, right? People I'm not even related to or care about, I remember. Well, it's because the brain does better with stories. So we take Bhagwan's stories and put it in our head, right? So we think about it, we remember it. Then, what kind of relationship? Is Bhagwan my father? Is Bhagwan my mother? Is Bhagwan my lover? Is Bhagwan my child? Is Bhagwan my friend? Is Bhagwan my brother? I know a Swamiji who sees Hanumanji as his older brother. And the way they talk to each other, he's from Hyderabad. So his slang is very rowdy slang. And that's how Hanumanji and him talk, right? You can have that yar-based relationship with Bhagwan. So how do I see Bhagwan? Now, how do I figure out what that relationship is like? When are you okay being yourself? Because if you want to see Bhagwan as your father or mother, but you end up being like this in front of them, that's not a very comfortable relationship, right? Are you more comfortable seeing Bhagwan as a friend? Would you be willing to sit like this and chill with Bhagwan and let Bhagwan into your heart when they're your friend? Perhaps that's the relationship, right? So then we break that. What kind of relationship? What familial or friendly relationship? Maybe you're super close to some aunt of yours, right? So maybe it's a relative. I know some uncles are very close to their, nieces and nephews. And the kids feel, my mom serves as like the listener to all the conversations in my cousin's families, more so than they talk to their moms, right? So whoever it is, can you try to replicate that with Bhagwan? And then the journey really begins. If it's journaling, for me it's journaling. And I haven't journaled in a long time, and I'm pushing myself to journal more, because that tells me my relationship with Bhagwan is something I'm not putting enough of an effort into, right? Even if it's 5 minutes, just telling Bhagwan, hey, thanks Bhagwan for this. Or, Bhagwan, today was horrible because of this. And if you read my journals, you'll think I'm the most angry, depressed, jealous, put all the other negative attributes in there kind of person. Why? Because that's when I remember him. And I sit quietly and I say, why did you do this? Why am I in this situation? Right? So nobody should read other people's journals for that reason. You get a false idea of who they are. And you see people at their worst too, right? But the way I process is writing. And when I read back, and I do that often, I read back and I say, hey, Swati, you were really upset because of these 2 things that day. It's literally a week later and you don't even remember. You need to try to not let those things get on your nerves so much next time. So it serves as a tool for myself. It's a reflective tool. But mainly, it's for me to let Bhagwan know what's going on in life, right? So for you, it might be writing. For you, it might even just be sitting with Bhagwan in traffic. And nowadays you have those Bluetooth and like hands-free. Nobody's going to think you're crazy, I promise. Before, that used to be a thing, right, in the 90s, where people were talking to themselves and then they pull their hair back and you're like, oh, they're not crazy. Now everybody's talking to themselves and you can't even tell if it's one or the other. So you talk in traffic. Let it out. Our go-to ends up being, let me just play something mind-numbing on the radio, or of course, better yet, let me feed my intellect by listening to some NPR or something else and know more about how this world is going to crash and burn today or yesterday, right? Because that's kind of the mind-numbing that we do. Instead, okay, Bhagwan's in the passenger seat with me, and we're going to have a conversation. This is what happened this morning. This is what I'm dreading at work today. Right? I don't want to have this conversation with my superior or my person that works for me, right? How should I approach this, Bhagwan? You put me in this situation, you find a way out. I didn't ask for this promotion, kind of did, but I didn't ask for all the pressure. Now you have to help me get through this pressure, right? So maybe for you, it's traffic conversations, right? Maybe it's actually sitting in front of your altar for 5 minutes every day, if you have the luxury of that these days. Right? So then, now we're at a place of finding that time to spend with Bhagwan, to converse with Bhagwan, right? And it'll be weird at first, right? The best thing is you don't have to tell anybody. You really don't. I tell you all because I don't care, right? If you think I'm crazy, if I'm not crazy, that's up to you. I have nothing invested in the relationship. But you don't have to tell anyone. You can keep it to yourself, and it's for your own sanity, which we all need. So, I think I'll stop there, because beyond that is you. It has nothing to do with the outside. It's how you build that relationship and what Bhagwan tells you. Because to each of us, he will tell us something different. People sometimes ask me to make life decisions for them, and I can't. Because I'm not you, and I'm not Bhagwan. Because each person will have to make a decision based off of what they can handle or not handle and how they've lived and not lived. This is a kind of heavy example, but people talk about relationships, right? Whether you're dating and breaking up or you're divorced. These days, people are in serious relationships for 10 years, they're not married, and they break up, and people are like, oh, it's just a breakup, it's not a divorce. It can be just as bad. A divorce could potentially be easier. So there's no way to say this is less or this is more. And the vulnerability, right, of the mind. Some people come and talk to me about their kids. Oh, it's their first boyfriend and it's high school or college or whenever. And, they'll get over it. But think about the mind that's not fully formed at 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way. How deeply that's affected versus somebody who's in their 40s or 50s who are like, been there, done that, I'm getting a divorce, I'm going to live my life, bye. They have the ability to move forward if that's their attitude, right? Versus someone who thought that was their life, even though they're 14, 15. So, I can't tell you what to do in any situation, but you can evaluate objectively through Bhagwan's divine grace and guidance when you tune into it. Because if you lean on Bhagwan to make whatever decision it is in life, then you put the pressure of everything working out on his shoulders, not your own. I'm leaving this job for another job. The ideal way to leave a job is how? Having another job lined up. And you do it, right? You're like, I'm taking this risk. I'm supposed to, I'm in my 3rd round of interviews. I'm supposed to get that 2 weeks notice. I just can't handle this job anymore. And then you don't get that job. Instability is there. But you take it off your shoulders and put it on Bhagwan. And the difference between surviving and not surviving is how much pressure you take off of yourself and put onto Bhagwan. Otherwise, if I keep the pressure with me, that's when I will shrivel up. I become a raisin, right? But if I can keep the pressure off of myself, again, psychologically speaking, my resources are not getting used up in stress and anxiety and depression. They get used up in finding another job. Like, practically speaking, I'm not sitting there upset. I'm saying, okay, the disappointment is there. You take that off of my shoulders, and I'm going to sit and wherever, you look for jobs, whether you're messaging random college people from LinkedIn or, you're going to meet and greets or you're joining some network, my mind space is available to move forward. Silence is where you can get work done. Versus shoulda, coulda, woulda, ought to. Why? Why me? Why here? Why now? Why not them? So having a relationship with Bhagwan frees up this mind to focus on moving forward in life as gracefully, as sincerely, as joyfully, as optimistically as possible. Sometimes you hear people speak optimistically or smile all the time, and you think, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying sometimes we think, they don't know what it's like to have a horrible life. They don't know what it's like to wake up every morning with this going on. That's why they're so happy. That's why they're making it in life. There has to be something that they're missing to not realize that life is full of suffering. How many of you have heard of Viktor Frankl? The search of, what is meaning making? Man's search for meaning, right? You look at him, and again, I love all my classes. And this came up in some of my classes of meaning making. You look at him, this person. Well, I'll tell you what he did so we can judge him and then go back to where he came from. So he said he was talking to one of his patients, and the patient's wife passed away, right? And he tells the patient is the patient's husband. So the husband is depressed. He lost his wife. Comes to the doctor, and Dr. Frankl says, think about it this way. If your wife continued living in that poor health situation, would she be happy? No. Okay. What if you died? Would she be happy after? No, she would probably suffer because she had to be by herself and there's so many pieces to pick up and all that. Okay. So what if you see it as you taking the suffering on yourself, which you would be willing to do, yes? To remove suffering from your wife, you'd be willing to take on anything. I just don't want my wife to suffer. So yeah, I'm willing to take on suffering. Well, what if you see the situation as you taking on a suffering so that your wife could leave peacefully? So your wife could move on. You let her go, and she's happy now. You're the one that's suffering. You're the one that's living. You're the one that has to continue and figure out how to do this without her. And that was a huge shift for him. Instead of mourning, saying, oh, my poor wife, she left, my poor wife, he's thinking, oh, I've got a life to live, and she's okay. In fact, she's fine. She's gonna be fine. I don't have to worry about her. I just have to move forward in my life. Some of us can't deal with that, right? I'm like, why? Why would he say that about him? Now we talk about Dr. Frankl's life. He was in concentration camps at the peak of his life. He was a Jewish individual who had to see amounts of suffering that we have never seen. I'm making assumptions, but amounts of suffering we've never seen in life. And again, I'm making an assumption that we haven't seen people drop dead around us because of starvation on a daily basis, irrespective of age. Right? And what he did in that situation was he had to remove himself. Because if he didn't become objective in that situation, he would have lost all hope to survive. He would imagine himself. He says this. He would imagine himself giving lectures saying, when I was in this concentration camp and I survived, this is what I thought. As a survivor of, my purpose is, my meaning comes from what I saw. Because he had a purpose, which is to talk about his life later, he lived to talk about his life. Does that make sense? So we assume, we have a lot of assumptions about how other people's lives were, and we attribute, oh, okay, they think suffering is so easy, wait till they have to suffer. You have no idea. I have no idea. But what I can do is change how my brain works right now. Focus less on the outside. And if I am miserable, how do I move past that? If I'm joyful, how do I sustain that and share that with others? Because that is something the world needs. You really don't need more doctors and engineers and architects and lawyers, and that's a side. That's your job, right? That's a vocation. At some point, you should retire from that. That's how people used to live. That's not an identity. Who I am should be joy incarnate. I am joy. I'm not joyful because then I could be sorrowful. But I am that joy. And it should emanate from me. I shouldn't say, listen to me because I'm happy. I'm a happy person and you will be too. Or else. That doesn't work. But you gravitate towards happy people. They don't have to say, come here, I'm happy. Come here. In fact, you should be very wary of people that say, just $2,000, the secret to your happiness. Because how do they know you? Right? They don't know anything about you or your life. The only person that knows you is you. So the secret to your happiness, debt-free, tuition-free, fees-free, is you. The only class you need to take is self-analysis, self-reflection. The only resource you need is time. And that is the most fragile resource. That too, uninterrupted time. You're like, yep, doesn't happen. Yeah, uninterrupted time. I'm guilty of it too. Anytime 5 minutes, I just want to numb the brain, whatever, whether it's scrolling or reading an article or getting out of the head instead of sitting with myself. Right? So the reason I say this is when we develop a relationship with God, it's not to compare ourselves with others. And the main obstacle that happens in developing this relationship is when we look outside of ourselves. And that obstacle is looking at other people in their lives. He's happy, I'm not. She's happy, I'm not. the entire elaborate example I gave with Viktor Frankl was because we need to look inwards. The world can literally be on fire, right? But it won't matter if we can bring ourselves to that platform of serenity within ourselves. And the reason I say we focus on ourselves is, again, there could be a spoon dropping, and that could make some people, that sound can just be the end of it for some people. They could be like, that's the last time you throw that spoon off of that high chair. You know what I'm talking about, right? And for some others, there could be an earthquake and a thunderstorm and everything, and they are just fine, right? They live to talk about it. And they document it on Instagram. I remember I was watching somebody literally in a flooding situation sharing Instagram posts about how it's going. They're sitting in their attic looking down. And this is not fake. This was the Texas floods that just happened. And they're like, oh, it's coming up to our knees. Don't know if we'll make it. Yeah, they made it. They waited for the rescue rafts over their house, literally. They climbed out of their attic. They helped save their neighbors. That could be a very traumatic event for some people, where they're like, I'm trying to say in 1990. It's not 1990s anymore. But way in the future, they'll be like, in 2000, this happened, and it was the most traumatic thing. Well, these people will tell it like a war story. Man, we were stuck in the attic, and then we had all these, Cheez-Its and Lay's chips, and we survived on those for 4 hours, just 2 chips at a time, and, what's the difference? You probably never look at Lay's the same, but it's what's going on in here, right? So, more than half the class went into that, but I elaborated on that because there are people who are asking me about that. So the next verse, verse 4 in Sadhana Panchakam, which we will chant and go through today, doesn't require as much explanation. There are very clear instructions. I'll talk more about it next week, but at least we'll look at it. We finished, for those of you who are not sure where we are, it's been time. We finished the 3rd verse. We're on verse 4. We don't have time to chant through everything. But verse 4. We'll do lead and repeat. There's a bit of a tongue twister even for me, so we'll try our best. Khrudvyadhishcha chikitsyatam pratidinam. Khrudvyadhishcha chikitsyatam pratidinam. Bhikraushadham bhujyatam. Bhikraushadham bhujyatam. Svadvannam natu yachyatam vidhivashat. Svadvannam natu yachyatam vidhivashat. Praptena santushyatam. Tena santushyatam. Shitoshnadi vishahyatam natu vritha. Shitoshnadi vishahyatam natu vritha. Vakyam samucharyatam. Vakyam Audasinyamabhipsyatam janakrupa. Audasinyamabhipsyatam janakrupa. Naishthuryamutsrajyatam. Utsrajyatam. Not bad, not bad. Okay. Krud vyadhi. Krud is hunger.
Can you break down the pronunciation? Like
Yes,
exactly
yes.
what's happening?
Krud vyadhi. Krud. It's a combination of 3 letters, Sanskritam. Krud. K, Sha, u, kshu. Ka, sha, and u, kshu. Kshud is the word. Kshud is hunger. Vyadi, disease. Chikitsyatam, get it treated. How do we see this? Hunger is a disease of this body. It's a metaphor. It is a weakness or a disease, because that's what we see a disease as, a weakness, right? And all you need to do is get it treated. Prati dinam, prati every, dinam day, every day. Bhiksha ushadham bhujyatam. Your bhiksha, remember this is for those seeking enlightenment, so they actually have bhiksha. Grahastas, we're supposed to give bhikshas, okay? So we're supposed to feed others, not just, kiddie parties and dinners. Like you should feed sannyasis, you should feed children, orphans, brahmanas. Brahmanas meaning those who are doing Bhagavan's work, not brahmana by name. So you need to, that's a part of the grahastha rules, okay? So bhiksha, aushadam, bhujyatam, bhujta, to eat. Aushadam, medicine. The medicine for this disease of hunger is bhiksha. Bhiksha should be what? Swadu annam, swadvanam. Swadu, tasty, tasty. Swadu, so tasty. Not sadhu, swad. Isn't there a rice brand, swad? Anyway, tasty, swad, annam, food. Annam is not just rice. It's any kind of food, annam. Anything that keeps this body going. Annam. Natu yachyatam. Yachyam, bhiksha, begging, right? Do not beg for tasty food. So have you ever seen a sannyasi? Says, give me food, only tasty food. Swiggy, Zomato. What do we use here? I was in India for 3 weeks, so Swiggy and Zomato is top of my mind. What do we have here? Grubhub and Uber Eats. What is the other one? Uber Eats, yeah. I don't use those as much because there's not as good food here in Jacksonville. Sorry, Jacksonville. But swadvanam, natu yachyatam. Don't beg for tasty food. And you'll see people in India, they're giving these sadhus rice and dal, and then inside there have all of their puri and chole. But it's their dharma as sadhus not to beg for tasty food, right? Then what should we have? Vidhi vashat. Vidhi. Nan-vidhi, tale-vidhi. Vidhi, your fate, right? Vashat, by means of your fate, praptena, whatever comes, santushyatam, santushtam, santosham. Be happy with whatever comes to your plate according to your fate. Those two lines go together. So what is the summary of those two lines? Hunger is a disease. Treat it with the medicine known as bhiksha. Do not beg for tasty foods. Instead, be happy with whatever comes to your plate according to your fate. What? So if I'm supposed to go hungry, it's my fate? Own life stories here. I will order something on Uber Eats or whatever. It is there. It is ready to be ordered. I pay the money. I go there to pick it up and they're out of bread to make my banh mi. Whatever. I saw the food, salivated looking at the food, made sure that it was something I desired. I feel like eating this. I'm craving this, whatever. Paid for it, financial means to obtain the food. Then my kind husband wants to pick it up because he's on the way. I have a resource willing to retrieve the food. I have every everything. Yet when the food needs to be made, they realize they don't have the bread. At that point, I'm annoyed. I don't care. I'm not going to have banh mi today. Well, you're not going to make somebody run around. I'm not going to order from another restaurant. What do? Khichdi. That's it. My dreams of having that are over. Right? Now that's a very privileged example. Yet it's an example nonetheless. So many times food can go all the way to your mouth. You are ready to eat. And something happens. Either in here or outside. And you wash your hands. Vidivashat. Whatever is supposed to come to you will come to you. I believe the reason that happened, and this is how I make sense of the world, is I believe in karma, right? Because I genuinely can remember times in my own life where my mother gave me something very healthy, freshly made, and my mind said, ugh, again. Right? I don't need to go back to 10 janmas. This janma is enough. Where I disrespected annam. The Shastras say, annam na nindyat. Nindyat meaning don't say anything bad about food. Don't ever criticize food. How many times I've thrown away food? Now I know some people are like, well, don't force yourself to eat it. Well, then put less on your plate, bro. Right? Like, that's something that gets on my nerves even today. Don't go order a buffet. Like, the buffet's not going anywhere. That's why it's called a buffet. It's right there in front of your eyes. Nobody's snatching it away from you, unless somebody does. But we decide how much comes in our plate and whether we want to eat it later or not, right? And if we do end up, for whatever reason or circumstance, throwing that food away, know that we just did ninda of food, and it will come back. There will be a time you are so hungry, all you want are just French fries or something to put in your stomach, and you have a half an hour because your first flight was late, your layover is now cut short, and you have to run across half of Germany, it seems, to catch your next flight. And the only next meal you're going to get is whenever the flight attendant feels like feeding you, right? Unless you have some nice people that'll throw you some cookies, right? So these times, the way it's helped me understand this verse, those times where I get so angry or upset, and I get angry when I'm hungry, it's all just karma. And that is an opportunity for my sadhana. Don't get so angry. Let the body experience what it's like to not have food for 3 hours. That is not that big of a deal. That is so far from deprivation of food. That is not that big of a price to pay. So, the reason I gave those examples is we may read this, because this is my job as far as I see it, to connect this with our lives. You may think I'm not a sannyasi, I don't eat bhiksha, whatever. But these things happen to us, where we get hungry and the food is not available, or we are tempted to waste food, right? No matter how, unless it's detrimental to your health, right? Like there's salmonella, like, okay, don't eat that, right? Unless it's detrimental to your health, we can always just eat the food. Only when we stop, what is this? I mixed this up. Are we living to eat or eating to live? I hear that so many times. We eat to live or live to eat. Living is a non-negotiable. Eating, you can survive quite some time without eating. In fact, some people survive a long time without eating. I am nowhere close to that. So our relationship with food, does it always need to be tasty, tasty? Maybe we're at this point where we're like, yeah, Hyderabad food, Bangalore, I gotta get my benne dosa. I'm still having those cravings. But there will be situations where my cravings will not be met. How do I react to that? Am I throwing a tantrum, or can I accept it? Today, I am eating bhiksha food. Why? I don't have another option. Or you go to some loving person's house, but they're horrible cooks, right? And that's happened so many times. I've been to bhiksha with Swamiji. My bhikshas weren't bad. I'm not going to name people. But I've been with Swamiji's. And I'm like, Swamiji, how are you eating this? There's so much salt. Or the rice isn't cooked. That's going to mess with your stomach. And you have to travel tomorrow. And he says, bhikshaushadam bhujyatam. So the way we practice this is in these ways. When the situation arises for us to do sadhana, at least then, let's try to do sadhana. Then the next two lines, this shitoshnadi vishahyatam natu vritha vakyam samucharyatam. Two things in these two guidelines for us. One, the dualities like shita and ushna, cold and heat, cold and hot, whatever is surrounding us, treat them equally. Shitoshnadi. Now these dualities have to do with all dualities in life. Joy and sorrow are dualities in life as well. Ups and downs, right? Success and failure. Criticism and applause. Both. These are all the dualities. Whenever this is what we have to do when we look at our shastras. When they give you one, you do etc. What are the etceteras? All the dualities of life. In all of that. Impermanence is true. In all situations. So when you get something, it's got to go away. And if something goes, something's got to come back. That's a rule. But in all of that, vishahyatam. Endure all pairs of opposites, heat and cold alike. The next line, the next instruction, natu vritha, vritha, wasteful. Vritha Sanskritam, wasteful. Vyartha. Wasteful what? Vakyam. Vakyam, talks. Samucharyatam, speaking. Right? Avoid wasteful talks. Wasteful talks, many examples. We always, I think 80% of our talks, my talks could be wasteful, right? So the two instructions in these lines, be able to withstand all pairs of opposites. That comes many times in the Bhagavad Gita also. 3-4 times it talks about shitoshnadi. And then don't have wasteful talks. Next, audasinyam mabhipsyatam janakripa naishturam mutsrijyatam. So we'll focus on these last two lines next week, but I'll explain it. Audasinyam. This gets misinterpreted. Be indifferent. Be indifferent. So I just sit there like I don't care about other people? That's not what this is talking about. The Bhagavad Gita talks about being indifferent as being stable. What word did you say?
Equanimity.
Equanimity, yes. Even-mindedness. So you don't have to show it on your face all the time. I am even-minded. I'm not going to smile or be sad. Because some people think that's what we talk about, being so stoic, right? That's not what it means. Internally, because if internally you're about to explode, it doesn't matter what you're showing, right? And a gentle smile never hurt anyone. And if it hurts somebody, then that's their problem, right? It's because they're having something going on in their mind. Being indifferent does not mean looking or speaking or behaving like a robot. You still have to show some kind of warmth because we are warm-blooded human beings. Then, jana kripat naishturyam utsrijyatam. This is also sometimes misunderstood. It says, save yourself, utsrijyatam, from the meshes of other people's kindness. Jana kripa. Usually kripa we see as a positive thing, right? People's kindness, kripa. Jana kripa, people's kindness. So why is this telling you to avoid that, right? Are we supposed to be holier than thou and not accept help from anybody? That's not what this is saying. This is just telling us that if we are able to do something on our own, we should continue to do it and not get pampered, tempted, or indebted to others on a continual basis. By all means, if we need help, then just take it, right? But I remember a famous actor was giving an interview, and he was talking about how he's so humble, right? And he's praised for it. And he's like, okay, let me back you up there. He says, I used to have an entourage, people to carry everything I had. To every appointment, I came with 10 people, and everything was taken care of. Then I got enmeshed in their lives because I cared for them so much. Somebody needed money for their kid to go to college. Somebody needed money for that. Then somebody lost some family member. And then at a certain point, they had to take a leave of absence, and I couldn't function without them. Without my entourage, I barely knew what clothes to put on and what car to drive. And I started losing my ability to do basic things on my own. That's what this is talking about, right? Like, you don't need to go back to writing letters. Like, email is fine. We all use email. There are certain things you can't live without, It's society these days. But do I constantly need to maybe ask the same person to pick my kids up from school? Maybe I step in, right? And say, okay, they've been doing a whole month shift, and yes, they're offering, and that's the other part of this. People will continuously offer, but we're all human beings. At some point, the resentment may build. It builds with your spouse. I changed the diaper this time, your turn. Smallest things. Resentment can build within such close relationships. Imagine outsiders. You might have been neighbors for decades. It doesn't matter. Take care of yourself. And as the pledge says, I go back to the pledge subconsciously so many times, give more than you take, right? Produce more than what you consume. That's what this is telling us. Don't constantly be indebted to others just because they're there to offer it, right? I know even with childcare, right? Oh, the grandparents are always there. They always want to help. But remember, they're getting older too. And my great-grandmother, my cousin was trying to give the baby to my great-grandmother, and she's like, I can't. Why? My hips. I can't. Genuinely, they can't even hold the child, right? But she's constantly saying, oh, you go take a bath, you go eat, you do things, I'll take care of the baby. Amma, you can't. But I can't keep saying that because then that demoralizes them, right? So what I do instead, we'll just all play in the kitchen. You'll come too. We'll all sit there. Just make sure she doesn't touch the stove. Whatever, right? So in that way, people will constantly offer. Whether they're genuine or not, none of our business. But our job is to constantly try to give more than we get. At whatever times we have the resources. Because God knows when we won't be able to give. I think we all tend to forget that. There will be a day when I can't, maybe drive because my eyes are failing me. And I won't be able to drive people around. For now I can, and I'll do what I can. So we'll look at more of this verse next week. We'll finish here. Again, if you have questions or anything, please let me know through text or a message, and we'll finish with Purnamadaha. Take a deep breath in. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.